morning, class, and welcome to online lesson 3. This lesson will be looking at the cognitive systems approach. If you haven't already, can you please pause this video and complete the warm-up quiz that is located in today's lesson plan. That warm-up will recap the concepts covered in last lesson, in particular tactical awareness, motor learning, and skill acquisition. Today's lesson objectives, you'll be able to understand and define the concept of cognitive systems approach, and you'll use that approach to examine movement sequences in touch football to explain their subroutines. So there are two major approaches that have developed over time in regards to motor learning. If you can recall motor learning from last lesson, that's the way we learn skills and physical movement. The first approach is the cognitive systems approach, and the second is the dynamic systems approach. So we'll look at both of these and look at the strengths and weaknesses of each one. The cognitive systems approach, now if you look at the word cognitive, that refers to a thinking or mental process. So this is the traditional type of learning and skill. So it's a linear model where skill is discussed and demonstrated, and then practiced in a closed environment without constraints. So the skill is generally broken down into its pieces or subroutines and worked on in isolation in a step-by-step model. So if we can look at our picture of the golfer and the coach, you can see here that the coach will be going through the subroutines of the golf swing. So you can see it's very hands-on. It's demonstrating each of the subroutines of the golf swing. Then the golfer will then practice this. Now it's practiced in a closed environment. In this case, it would often be a driving range. Now a driving range, you have a flat surface to hit the ball. There's a wide open space in which to hit the ball into, which doesn't have any obstacles or trees, water, or anything like that. So that is a closed environment in which an athlete can then practice those subroutines, especially of the golf swing. So as I said, this linear model is a step-by-step process. The first step is when the coach explains the motor program. The second step is when the coach will demonstrate the subroutines. The third step is when an athlete performs the motor program. So the motor program will be from start to finish. So for the golf swing, that will be from setup all the way through to contact and follow through. And the fourth step will be the coach provides immediate feedback and error corrects. So if we then look at our touch football games, if I look at, say, passing a ball, the subroutines for passing the ball is the motor program. And the subroutines, the first one would be the hand position on the ball, the arms punching out towards the receiver, releasing the ball and following through with the hands to be directed towards the target. So that example of the motor program of passing a ball, you can see that I've limited or reduced the amount of subroutines to only 3. The smaller amount you do, it makes it easier for beginners and athletes to be able to then demonstrate and practice. It also makes it easier for the coach to then error correct and provide feedback on. Because you can imagine that if that passing routine was then broken down into 10 steps, you can see how then as a beginner athlete, that would become very hard to remember and put into practice. The cognitive systems approach has, the strength of it is it can be very useful in breaking down a motor program. It can be useful in correcting technique and movement patterns. So if you can see that the athlete isn't passing the ball accurately, that could be a result of, say, step 3, where they're not following through directing their arms towards the target. And it's also good at detecting errors, where you can then look at each subroutine and alter. A weakness because of this, because the skill is taught in isolation, it's not the best way to allow for authentic gameplay, where many other factors influence performance. So, for sports like golf, this cognitive systems approach works well because the majority of the time the athlete isn't under pressure in order to perform the golf swing. However, if we transfer to touch football, which is our physical activity, all right, if you practice passing in isolation, so between you and a partner, and you're just constantly going over those subroutines to get the motor program of passing nice and accurate, you can imagine that if you then apply that to a game, all right, you cannot in a game stand there, make sure that your partner is directly next to you for you to be able to provide accurate passes too. So you can see that this approach starts to, when it comes to certain types of sports like touch football, starts to fall away when these motor programs are required in a game scenario, and when the athlete is under pressure, it's a lot harder for them to focus on subroutines in order to get an accurate passing. So the cognitive systems approach has generally been taught in physical education over the last 100 years. However, the theories have been developed recently. So what we want you to do now is use the cognitive systems approach to select 3 of the movement sequences below. You are to explain the subroutines involved, and then what we want you to do is I want you to film you as a coach demonstrating these subroutines. So for the passing example, I had those 3 subroutines. I would then film myself going through those subroutines, and then I'll put that on a Google Doc, and then you can share it on Compass. So just to recap, we've understood the concept and defined the concept of cognitive systems approach. So this is where we're looking at a linear model. It's a step-by-step process in which a coach is able to first demonstrate and discuss, then allow the performer or the athlete to perform the skill, and then the coach will provide immediate feedback. You'll then, in your activity, you need to go through this process and do this for 3 movement sequences in touch football. Thanks very much, and look forward to seeing your cognitive systems approach.